All right, so today's topic is all about the thyroid. We are definitely seeing more thyroid-related conditions at the nutrition clinic. I would say we've been seeing that consistently year on year, but definitely more since over the last 3 to 4 years. And I think some of the stresses that we've all been under are definitely playing a role. We've also seen an increase in autoimmune conditions, including autoimmune thyroid conditions over the years in younger populations. So, I'll be talking about that. But let me just start, as I do, I'll do about 25 minutes of going through some slides, and then I would really love for this to be a space where everybody asks questions, because really this is, I've been running the nutrition clinic for 12 years, it's 12 years this year, and this is really part of our community outreach work. We want to be able to share the information that we know. I think it's very important for people to know how they can be drivers of their own health. I think that is super important. I think we feel that intuitively. As I always say to my clients, I'm very respectful of mainstream medicine. I do believe that there is a role for different modalities. The modality I bring to the table is one where we're looking at how food and lifestyle can bring the body into balance. When it comes to the thyroid, there is of course the medical space and the space the lane I travel in and the space I hold. I don't get into the medical space, but I'll have an opinion on how food and lifestyle can optimize your thyroid. So I'll do that. I'll go through the slides, and then please feel free to ask questions. This is really your time, your space. You're giving up your Wednesday evenings or mornings for some people. So please use this to get the information you need. If you just give me a minute. Okay. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. This session is recorded. It is put on YouTube. So if anybody does not want their name, if you are concerned about confidentiality, please change your name, switch off your video, whatever works for you. But just so that you know that is something that we will be doing. We will be sharing this on our social media. Secondly, there won't be a session next Wednesday. I'm traveling, so the next session will be on the 1st of March. So just for some of you regulars who've carved this time aside, so please, I'd hate for you to be on Zoom waiting for me to let you in. So the next session is on the 1st of March. All right, let's get started. One of the things that I was just saying that we see a lot, we're seeing a lot more thyroid related issues. We are also seeing more women suffer from thyroid related issues, including thyroid autoimmunity. And I would even extend that to include all autoimmunity. Why women? There are a number of reasons. The big one is that there is a thyroid autoimmunity connection, and there is more autoimmunity in women in the first place. The estrogen, the female hormonal system, also is very closely linked to the thyroid system. And so during periods of the fertility years, the post-pregnancy years, the perimenopause years, when estrogen is changing, it does make us more vulnerable to thyroid issues. So we definitely see, if you feel like, why am I talking to my friends and it's the women who are complaining about thyroid issues? That is true. We do see it more in women for these reasons. So just as I was saying, there is the medical space. And if anybody has questions about medication, I would like to say up front that I'm not in a position to give an opinion on the medication you're on. That is the role of your medical doctor, your endocrinologist, or your primary GP. What I will talk about here is all supportive of what doctors do if you are on medication. There is a large group of people who have what I consider subclinical thyroid issues. They're not at the point where there is a medical intervention that is required, but that's where we can do a lot to bring the body into better balance. These are some of the tests that you may have done or may be interested to do. This is what I would consider a complete thyroid panel. Many of my clients see a doctor, get these tests done, and then bring them to me. And I'm looking at the same information from the point of view of what may be happening around nutrients and stress and food and everything else that I will discuss today. So just to put that there is the medical space and there is my space. Let's just take a snapshot of the science and the physiology here. The thyroid is a butterfly-shaped organ. It's in the neck. It produces T4. There is a hormone called TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone, which is produced by the brain. It's not produced by the thyroid. So the brain says we need thyroid. It gets converted in the first, it's T4, and then you want to go to T3. That's really the path you want. There is something called reverse T3, which competes with T3, and that can be a problem. And T3 then goes to the cell and acts there. So just as a quick summary, as a snapshot for those of who find this quite complicated, because it can be that way. These are some of the factors that inhibit proper production of thyroid hormones: stress, infection, trauma, radiation, medications, some of these toxins, as well as autoimmune disease, and celiac is one of them. This content is from the Institute for Functional Medicine. It is based in the US, where I think there is greater testing and greater incidence of celiac, which is why they've specifically mentioned celiac. Just as a side note, that's also where I have done my training. I've trained at the Institute for Functional Medicine, which I do believe is the leader in this whole space of integrative medicine, functional medicine. When I've trained with them, there've been a whole bunch of people, including medical doctors, pharmacists, naturopaths, herbalists who trained at the same time that I trained. So they do take a very broad approach into lifestyle, food, and physiology. Factors that help with the production of thyroid hormones. So specific nutrients are very, very important. Iron. So this I see a lot. Women who have a thyroid issue tend to also have anemia. It tends to go hand in hand. Iodine, tyrosine, zinc, selenium. Selenium is super important for the thyroids. A really good food source of selenium is Brazil nuts. And so if anybody's dealing with a hypothyroid issue, getting some Brazil nuts in is a really easy way of getting selenium in the diet. You don't need more than 2 or 3 Brazil nuts. Vitamin E, the B vitamins, vitamin C, and vitamin D. It's astonishing to me how many people are low on vitamin D in a country where we have lots of sunlight. So vitamin D is made through sunlight exposure, but we don't sit out in the sun very much. And some of us just don't have the enzyme ability to produce vitamin D even through sunlight. Similarly, you want these things take the body into this direction, the reverse T3 direction, which we don't want. And it's a very similar list to what you'll hear from me in this half-hour conversation about factors that affect the thyroid: stress, trauma. A strict low-calorie diet can be stressful for the body. We talked a lot about diets last week. The wrong diet can be incredibly stressful for the body. Inflammation, toxins, infections, some dysfunction, and certain medication can also do that. And on the flip side, selenium and zinc, again, are really important to make this conversion. Similarly, vitamin A, exercise, and zinc are important to improve the sensitivity of the cell. So you want to kind of really do everything on this side and be very aware of what's happening on this side, just as a snapshot of the thyroid. So when a number of women come to me, and I hear this actually a lot. I hear people say, I wish it were my thyroid, because then it would make some sense. I'm feeling these symptoms. I'm getting my thyroid tested, and it's not a thyroid condition where I can just be given a medication to take care of it. And these are some of the symptoms that women in particular report, right? So the tiredness, weight gain, feeling cold, which is not here, but feeling cold is one of them as well. Dry skin, dry and fairly, it's kind of it feels almost like a rash, like a wrinkly skin, a rough skin. I think rough skin is the right word. It's a dry, rough skin that comes with thyroid. Menstrual issues, concentration, mood. Some of these are very general. So it's quite hard to say, is it the thyroid, is it not, which is where testing comes in. When I've trained with the people I trained with, the mentor I worked with, her classic line is sluggish thyroid, sluggish everything. So it is one of those hormones that affects you head to toe. If you're hypothyroid, so if there is a sluggishness or even subclinical hypothyroid, where your thyroid is not working to optimum capacity, it does affect everything. It can cause this sense of you just feeling exhausted, but even things like constipation, even digestion becomes sluggish in a thyroid-related situation. talk a little bit about what I'm seeing in my practice, some of the factors that stop people from getting better. And I'm just going to take a little pause from the clinical work to talk about some of the emotional, psychological, social issues that get in the way, even when there's information. A big one is fear of change. I think we get very stuck, understandably so, in patterns, particularly when it comes to food, sleep, habits. These are, for many of us, these are very close to our heart. And I completely get it, because I think all of us, all humans, have a reaction to, oh my God, you're asking me to change something that's so familiar. I may have been eating this food since I was a child. So gluten is a big one. When I say to people, let's cut out gluten, some people just say, look, I've been having this for a long time. How can I design a meal without it? And there is a fear of change in some people. I can almost tell in that first appointment how open a person is to change. And some people surprise me. So there's some people who come in saying, I want to make changes, tell me what to do. And there's some people who are really cautious. Some of these people who are really cautious can become the best advocates for lifestyle change, because they just need to overcome this bump, this resistance. But I think it's important for all of us to just examine where we are. How fearful are we of change? And if we want a change in our results, are we willing to change our behavior? Because if you don't, you can end up in this loop where you think, I want something different, but then you're not willing to do something different. The second category that the second trend that I see is self-help. There is so much information. I think there is over-information. I think it is a clutter of information, and it can be exhausting and completely overwhelming. It's very easy to type into Google a symptom and just get so much information. Often the information will be contradictory, and some of it will be really sound, and then some can be at an extreme. I would like to caution people that if you're reading information on social media, you need to know that if things are not loud, it doesn't get attention. So people tend to go really loud. You won't always get a reasonable answer, because that doesn't get the likes and the numbers, right? So just be very aware that what is loud is not always what is right. So this desire to figure it out on your own, that's how I got into this space, and I completely respect it. But I think it helps to just recognize, am I taking on more than I can handle? Am I getting overwhelmed by the information that I have put myself in the middle of? The third thing that I see is head in the sand. I know I need to do something, I don't want to do it. Again, it's part of fear of change. It's part of and part of the fear of change is also, a number of clients say to me, I don't want to be that person at the dinner party who has to eat differently. It is uncomfortable. There is this book and lots of information online. Somebody's written a book called The Healthy Deviant. And the idea is that in order to be healthy today, you have to be a deviant, because the norm is no longer supporting health. So the norm, which is eating a lot of sugar, eating whatever is in front of you, eating processed food just because it's easy or because it is okay. And this whole idea of eat everything in moderation, I think gets people into a lot of trouble, because what does that really mean? It means that I can get away with things, but if it's working well for you, great. But if it's not working well for you, then we need to get the head out of the sand and say, look, what's really happening over here? And the last one is the I am fine, right? I think a lot of people don't want to really admit that they're not feeling fine. And, if you walk down the street and you meet a friend and they ask you, how are you feeling? Your standard answer is, I am fine. But again, I'm not asking you to tell every friend everything that's happening with you, but just reflect, are you feeling fine? Is something not feeling okay before it becomes to the point where it's just really painful? So just a few, this is really food for thought, just a few observations that I'm making in the work that I'm doing, and little reminders that I hope resonate with you and help you take some of the information I'm giving you and take it to the next step. All right, let's look at some of the root causes. Let's get back to the thyroid, right? What are the root causes of thyroid issues? And the one thing that I'd like to say is I see people who have active thyroid hypothyroidism or hyperthyroidism, more hypo. They can be on medication. They're being managed by a doctor. They come to see me to see how we can slow down or, improve the root causes that may be causing this condition and get them to feel better. In many cases, I partner with the doctor and we can look at whether that medication can be reduced or adapted based on how they do. There are some people who have an autoimmune thyroid condition. These are Hashimoto's and Graves' disease. And again, my role is that of partnering with the doctor, because quite often these people are being either managed or are being tracked so that we know if they do, if the doctor needs to know if they do need medication at some point. And then there is perhaps the largest category of people whose thyroid isn't great. It is medically not at the point where they need medication, but it's not optimum. And because it's not optimum, there is the time and the space to say, let's see what lifestyle can do. Let's come in and see if we can improve it before it gets to the point where it is a medical acute care issue. So these are some of the root causes that we see. Food sensitivities, absolutely. If you have hypothyroidism or Hashimoto's, get off gluten. That is one of the connections that I see all the time. But it's not always just gluten. It can be gluten, dairy, egg, soy, a whole bunch of things. So food sensitivities are important. Toxins. The thyroid is very, very vulnerable to chemical toxins. And coming back to the female, why do women have more thyroid issues? We do have to accept that women can put on a number of different chemicals on their skin, on our skin, before we leave the door in the morning. And so that exposure to toxins does matter as well. Stress and sleep, huge connection. I talk a lot about the adrenal or the nervous system, and I will talk about that a little bit more in a few slides later. But I see the thyroid hormonal system as a cousin of the stress system. It is related to the nervous system. It is also related to the female hormonal system. All hormones are like dominoes. You touch one, the others do get impacted. So there is this incredible interconnectedness between the thyroid, stress, and sleep hormonal systems. I've talked a little bit about vitamin and mineral depletion. The reality is we're not getting our nutrients from our food, right? We're not getting anywhere close to what we need. So it is understandable that there is low nutrient status in people. Also, people are not digesting well. We have huge issues with the microbiome not being where it needs to be. So if you're not digesting well, you're not eating high nutrient foods, you're stressed and sleep. So all your vitamins are and your minerals are just required. You need a lot more. You can easily end up with deficiencies. When it comes to deficiencies, I look at things like a bank account. You have to think about what are you adding in and what are you drawing? And the reality is we're drawing a lot more than we're adding in. And so think about ways in which you can add into that nutrition, lifestyle, wellness reserve, so that if you are not able to stick to it 100% because you're traveling a lot or life gets busy, you have some reserve to draw on. So let's look at the thyroid and thyroid-related issues through a functional lens. The work I do divides the body into 3 systems: gut health and diet, stress and sleep, detoxification. When it comes to the thyroid, each and every one of these is involved. So I do see that anybody with an autoimmune condition, including Hashimoto's and Graves' disease, we have to look at the gut. The reason is that the large part of your immune system rests in the gut. Your immune system really lives over here. And so when you're dealing with any autoimmunity basically means that the immune system doesn't know what is self and what is foreign. So we have to look at the gut. Stress and sleep, absolutely massive when it comes to the thyroid. And I'll explain why. And detoxification is really important because, as I said, the thyroid is so vulnerable to toxins. If you have a thyroid issue, you can assume that detoxification has been affected at some level. This is the system I use with my clients, where we take each of these boxes and we really work through this like a jigsaw puzzle. One of the things that I have found is when somebody has hypothyroidism, the problem typically starts over here. This is short form, this is nervous system or stress. When you're under long-term stress, we call that sympathetic dominant nervous system. The sympathetic dominant nervous system is your fight-flight response. So if you think about the body is still like a caveman or cavewoman in design. We're very much designed for stress in short spurts. The moment stress goes on for long term, the body cannot figure out why this war is not ending, because the nervous system believes we're still fighting an animal or fighting a war or being chased by an animal. And if that continues, the body just says, you know what, this is not sustainable. I need to slow things down. And the place it goes to slow things down is the thyroid, because that's your thermostat. That's your metabolism. That's where you burn. You burn, right? So your metabolism is where you burn fat, you burn nutrients, you burn energy. So it slows that down. It's almost forcing you to become sluggish in order to protect you from burning through resources. So you cannot talk about the thyroid without talking about stress. You cannot talk about an autoimmune thyroid condition without talking about the gut. So these connections are very important. So if somebody asks me, give me a thyroid diet, I can give you a baseline diet that is very useful, but to really know what's going on with you, we need to unpack all of this. This is the puzzle we need to figure out for you. I'd like to spend a few minutes talking about something called leaky gut. Leaky gut is the scientific term for it is intestinal permeability. It's what happens when the gut lining gets affected. So we have this gut lining, which is, if you just imagine the food goes down this tube and this tube turns into the stomach and then the intestine. That's what I mean by the gut lining. It's a single cell thick lining, so it's very vulnerable. There isn't much backup over here. It gets affected through stress, toxins, food particles that are not digested. If you're not digesting well, chewing well, getting enough digestive enzymes, it's going to be a problem. Certain drugs, pathogens, and for people who have more serious, we can keep this aside, organ malfunction, but let's look at some of these. These can inflame the gut. So what started as cells that were really tightly packed together, making sure that only food goes into the bloodstream, which is here, and anything that we don't want just goes out through the toilet. This can get damaged. And once this gets damaged, you have things going in that shouldn't be going in. And that's what causes food intolerances. So a food intolerance is not an allergy that's for life. A food intolerance is a result of not having a healthy gut lining. And once we get this better, we can always add back foods that you're sensitive to. But if you look at this cascade, food intolerances do lead to immune system issues, which can lead to autoimmunity. So when you're dealing with an autoimmune condition, thyroid or not, we have to, this is the big chunk of work that we have to do. We have to figure out, is it stress? Is it toxins? Is it the wrong food? Is it chemicals? Is it pathogens? What is causing this damage? And how do we then start reversing this process? And this is really the process I use to reverse that process sorry, my computer is doing funny things. The process that I use always starts by getting to know a person, getting some tests done so that we can understand what's going on with the specific human being in front of me, not the general information. Always start by cleaning out, just getting the food, a diet sorted out that's just clean foundational eating to get nutrients in. And then we really start the repair work. The repair work includes closely examining sleep and stress. I don't know if anybody here uses an Aura ring. This is what the ring looks like. I'm just trying it out. If you can see it, it's got little sensors at the bottom. And so I wear this. You can wear it on any finger, and it's measuring my sleep, something called HRV, which is a measure of stress. And it's been really interesting to get that data for myself. So we're using tools like this in our practice so that we can really get to the detail of what's stopping you from healing. We do a number of tests to look at what's going on in the gut, how well you detoxify, and you'll see that metabolism, and many people with the hypothyroid issue are concerned about metabolism, but metabolism and hormone balance really comes as the result of doing this work. It doesn't come, you don't do this work before, you don't have hormonal balance and then do this. You do this and then as a consequence, you have better hormonal balance. A snapshot of some of the tests that we do. This is what a food sensitivity test looks like. most people have sensitivities to gluten, dairy, eggs in that order from a population point of view, at least the population we see. Now, this particular person reacts really strongly to dairy and chestnut, which there's no way I could have guessed that. And then a moderate sensitivity to eggs, miso, and yogurt. And then these are the lower sensitivities. As I said, a food sensitivity is a really good snapshot of what you can't eat because it's triggering inflammation in the gut. But also if somebody has a massive number of food sensitivities, I know that there is a lot of inflammation. That's going to take some time to heal. And we have to look at all the moving parts to make that healing happen. We can measure what's going on in the gut. So this person has reasonably good bacteria, but we would want that to be much higher. But if you look at these numbers, this is a marker for yeast. So a person with this profile has a massive overgrowth of yeast in the gut. Yeast is a fungal organism. We all carry it, but this is way, way, way too high. And this can cause symptoms like brain fog, eczema, rashes, acne. A lot of the clients who I work with who have skin-related issues to have a profile like this. So I'd like to leave everybody with something that they can do as a start, because I get that some of this feels complex. And one of the things I'd like to say is the body is complex. We know it's incredibly complex, and we're still learning about it. That learning is going to continue for a long, long time. I think what we do really well at the Nutrition Clinic is take what is complex, simplify it into steps, into a sequence. And I would like to say that we like to do things, we like to meet people where they are at. So I could have 2 clients today, and one person may need to do 6 things at the first appointment because they're ready for it or they need it. And there may be another client who can only do 1 thing. And that's all right. So we like to meet our clients where they're at rather than at this ideal level, because I think in the world of wellness and nutrition, there can be the sense of you have to go all or nothing. You can't have a single bite of this. The body is not that fragile. I think the way I look at it, I'm nudging the body in a direction rather than yanking it into a certain place. So where can you start from? First things first, I would say cut down gluten. And if you know your food sensitivities, cut them down. Avoid toxin overload. These are some of the common toxins: nonstick pans, plastics, fragrances and perfumes, scented home beauty products. You don't need all that. Unless it's an essential oil, you don't need those synthetic fragrances. I think we have to be very careful with what we're putting on our skin, but also what's in our environment. So if you're using air fresheners, car fresheners, you don't need those. Those are unnecessary. I even get surprised at how many schools have air fresheners, and I try to talk to schools, my daughter's school in particular. We don't need that. Use essential oils. I think that's fine, but I don't think you need artificial chemicals being exposed to teenagers. Work on stress and sleep. I put Neuromag here. It's a supplement I really like. Magnesium is extremely important. 90% of the population is deficient in magnesium. This form of magnesium, called magnesium threonate, is very, very good for those people who have difficulty sleeping. So I take it. My mom, who's here, takes it as well. We all just love this because it really helps. It's really subtle, but it gets you into deeper sleep. These are some of the basic nutrients that you need to top up. And I think we have to look at what's happening in gut health. So I'd like this to be just a starting point for you. If you can do one of these things, if you can just cut down on gluten, or if you can look at cleaning out some of the things in your kitchen and your home, it's a step in the right direction to supporting your thyroid. Just to let you know, for some of those who joined later, there won't be one of these sessions next week. I'm traveling, so I will join again the week after, which is the 1st of March. And that is, we call it a truly open office. It's an open office, which means I'm available to answer questions. So I won't be doing a presentation unless somebody says, we really want to hear about something. Please tell us about this. I would like it to be a space where you can just ask questions. And as always, if you have more questions, you want to reach out to somebody in our care team, just follow this QR code or this link and book a 10-minute inquiry with somebody who can answer your questions more one-on-one or directly. But of course, if you have questions now, I'll be very happy to take them. So let's see if there's anything in the chat. Yes, I have a couple of questions. A really good question about thyroid's effect on glucose tolerance or glucose intolerance, and what can we do to support thyroid health if you have an issue with glucose. So I'm just going to go back for a bit, go back to this. So if I go to this kind of image back here, if there's a thyroid issue, it's coming from this neuroendocrine system. Your neuroendocrine system is your brain, hormones, nervous system, energy, mood. Whenever we talk about energy, we're really talking about blood sugar. So yes, there is a very direct connection between the thyroid and blood sugar. And several studies have been done to see if simply getting insulin levels at a better state can help thyroid, and the answer is yes. Also, some people are looking at whether thyroid nodules can be a result of insulin issues. So the short answer is yes, you want to definitely make sure your insulin levels are balanced, your blood sugar is balanced. It has an impact on your thyroid. Blood sugar fluctuations are super stressful for the body, and so you want to prevent that. I've got a question about hypothyroidism as a result of thyroid being removed. What can one do to help rebalance body and health? There are situations where the thyroid has been removed, either partially or completely. Those people almost always need to take synthetic thyroid, and that's a thyroid replacement, and that's perfectly fine. My role in that case is to optimize all of this, because you can produce a hormone, but it's not just about producing it or taking it synthetically. It's also what you do with it. And that's where it's all of this. So if you're taking synthetic thyroid hormone because you don't have, your thyroid has been removed, and you're not dealing with stress and sleep, or you're not dealing with the gut microbiome, your requirements are likely to go up with time. So we're looking at optimizing the body so that what you are getting synthetically is being used better. Neuromag is something that we sell at the nutrition clinic. If anybody's interested, just reach out to us and we'll stock you up with it. Is it possible to reverse Hashimoto's? I have had success. I remember one particular person who I've seen fairly recently, a young girl, 18 years old, with Hashimoto's. She was feeling tired. She was at the last year of her high school, feeling exhausted, weight had gone up. She's an athlete, so it mattered a lot. She was going to go to college on a scholarship. The family, we looked at her levels. She saw a doctor. There were blood sugar issues. There were thyroid issues. She came to see me. Collectively, we all decided that it would be good for her to take a year off. So she took a gap year and we worked on the thyroid. It was an incredible experience because the entire family was committed to make this happen. And she herself was committed to make it happen. So she really made a lot of changes. And yes, we were able to get those antibodies to get back to normal. I don't guarantee reversal. And I don't even know if reversal is necessarily the goal, because it is a number. We wanted to get as close to normal as possible, of course, but it's about also not having it spike up, because what can happen once you have an autoimmune condition is that those antibodies can spike up and down a lot. So the more stability we get there, the better it is. So there's a question about if a person has had thyroid in their 20s, endometriosis, and now have a possible breast cancer diagnosis, how do we help a person like that? Whenever I see that, so the one thing that stands out in this, the first thing I'm going to say is estrogen dominance. Estrogen dominance is what happens when you have too much estrogen, either because estrogen is being overproduced, which can happen if you have extra fat cells, if there are hormonal imbalances, but also if you don't detoxify your hormones well. If detoxification is affected, you tend to have a long-term exposure to more estrogen than one needs. That can cause endometriosis, that can cause breast cancer. and that is also involved in thyroid. So that would be something that I would look at, and I would like to be able to get to the root causes, because there are these connections between all three diagnoses. You're welcome, person who asked that question. Any other questions? I'm just going to wait till people take their time to ask questions. I have a question. Is there anything to watch out for to prevent thyroid issues, for example, in food? So yes, I think you want to make sure it's not just food, it's food and lifestyle. You want to make sure that you are getting nutrients in, which means eating a diet that is whole food, less processed food. You want to get enough protein in, you want to get the minerals in. A lot of people focus on vitamins, less on minerals, but we actually need a lot of minerals. So that I would say is number one. Number two, you want to keep a close eye on stress and sleep. I think it's become one of those things that people are now taking for granted. There's almost the sense of course, you're going to, it's like eat broccoli, right? Yes, sleep more. But it matters. It really, really matters. So just the ability to get a good solid 7 to 8 hours of sleep does wonders for the body, does wonders for the physiology. So don't compromise on it and prioritize sleep. If stress is an issue, and I see this a lot with women, particularly women in our 40s, 50s, there are a lot of demands on us. And so there's just this sense of overwhelm and not having enough time for us. So let's look at that as well. Let's look at chemicals and body care products. Make sure you've got vitamin D looked at, make sure your B vitamins are looked at, make sure you're getting your basic minerals in, as I said. Iodine, you can get iodine through a lot of food sources, seafood in particular. I do find that people who are strict vegetarians tend to have more, at least in my practice, I do see more incidence of thyroid issues. And that could be because of overconsumption of gluten, perhaps over-reliance on soy. So it is important, if you have a hypothyroid situation, to not overconsume soy. Another little tip is, if you're eating cruciferous vegetables, so these are the great vegetables: broccoli, kale, cauliflower, cabbage, bok choy, all come in that family. It's a good idea to not overconsume them in a raw format. So I've seen some clients who've done like a kale smoothie every day for 5 years. The thyroid is not going to like that. So you want to cook these vegetables. Raw vegetables of this cruciferous family are not good for the thyroid. Okay, that's a great question on what do you eat to prevent yeast overgrowth, overload, or imbalance. So yeast sits firmly in the pathogen space. So yeast is a natural organism. We have 20 to 30 organisms in the gut. They're part of our microbiome, and they are a mixed bag of good and bad. I really equate it to a garden. You have the flowers, you have the weeds, and when you have a yeast overgrowth, the weeds have been allowed to overgrow. So I don't see it as it's not just as simple as what food did I not eat or what food did I eat. It's really looking at the ecosystem. What happened to the soil? What happened to the flowers? Why were these organisms allowed to grow? Because we have checks and balances in the body. So typical reasons are the soil is not healthy. It's inflamed. It doesn't have nutrients. It's not being fertilized. It's not being watered. First, we have to look at the soil. Then we have to look at, do you have the probiotics, which are your flowers? So if you have enough flowers and you have a healthy soil, it's less likely that you will have a yeast issue. But if the flowers are not there because you're wiping out your probiotics, either through overconsumption of antibiotics or having food that's highly processed, not sleeping well, stress, all of that can wipe out a population of good bacteria. Or worse, if you have that and the soil isn't healthy because it's just depleted, then yeast is going to have a field day. And you can almost imagine a garden with just weeds in it. That's what it's like. So we look again at the root cause rather than just looking at the weeds. And I do this work where I If we identify a yeast issue, we go in and we give certain herbs to kill it. And everybody's super excited about killing this yeast. It's almost like, I think, our natural instinct for war, right? Let's get rid of these guys. They're in my gut. What are they doing there? And I have to stop people and say, we cannot do that till we get the basics right. Don't try to go in and just yank out weeds, because more will grow till you deal with the soil and deal with the flowers. So that would be my way of describing that. Question about hypothyroidism. You can have hypothyroidism that is not Graves. Is it still considered autoimmune? Graves is considered autoimmune. You can have hypothyroidism without Graves, but they are separate. Heart palpitations are typical signs of a hyperthyroid situation, where everything is, you actually feel quite wired in that situation. Somebody wants to go back to a slide. Let me just. Is this the one? This one, I think. For probiotics, what is the minimum number of good bacteria strains we should be looking at? I like to do 40 to 60 billion. That's not million, but billion. If your test results show that your probiotics are low, or you have a yeast overgrowth, then we would even go higher. If you've taken antibiotics, we would go higher. And I like my probiotics to be stored in a cold environment. So we bring them in refrigerated, we store them refrigerated, because you can have a great probiotic that's then sitting in the heat and you've lost some of the live bacteria. Yes, you can have fermented vegetables. That's a question from somebody. Fermented vegetables as a probiotic. Absolutely, you can have fermented vegetables. But if you have acidity or heartburn, as this person does, then you want to just take it really slowly. Build it up slowly. Got somebody coming in at this time. Is Graves' disease reversible? I've had good results with a number, not all, but with a number of autoimmune conditions where we have stabilized and reversed it. But I have to say, when it comes to autoimmunity, it takes time. And it's not work that's done, it's work that's done to get better, but you have to stay better. And that takes, it does take a commitment. So when somebody comes in with an autoimmune condition, I'm not going to put them on our 3-month or 4-month program, because that's not what this story is about. It is about a longer engagement. So just to be upfront about that. Somebody wants, okay, let me, got another slide. Is this the one? Before the organic acid screen. Let me know if this is the slide you're asking for. Just want to make sure it's the correct one. Right, I think I've answered. All right. So if I've got somebody who's asked about this slide. So this is the slide for food sensitivity testing. All right, well, if you have more questions, I'm going to be online to answer them. But while we're waiting, does anybody have specific topics that they'd like to hear about more, or what they'd like to hear about for the next session, which is an open session? Do you think it's a good idea to have an open session? So please feel free to speak or write whatever works for you. I'd love to hear your opinion on what you need and what you would like to hear about. Heartburn, yes. Heartburn and acidity, yes. So I've got a really good question. If something is good for hyper, then is it not good for hypo? Like, how does that work? Yes and no. So yes, if you're hyper, you don't want to take extra iodine, selenium, and zinc. It doesn't mean you don't need any of it. Like, you do need vitamin D. But you would probably be more careful, particularly with iodine, because that's where it's going to matter a lot. You don't want to overdo these nutrients. Fertility issues that's a topic that's great. That's actually a topic really close to my heart, because that's how I got interested in the space in the first kind of 14, 15, now my daughter's 14, so 16 years ago. Nutrition for pregnancy is another one, so I can see that's an interesting topic. I was told that I would need IVF in order to get pregnant because I wasn't ovulating, and at that time I'd gone through a tremendous amount of stress, and so I felt intuitively that I needed to get healthier in order to carry a healthy pregnancy. And in the process, I started learning about fertility and toxins and nutrients. I was using a lot of non-stick pans. I was using a lot of plastics. I was eating a lot of bread. I used to bake bread all the time. That was something I enjoyed doing. And so I went through a complete change in my diet and lifestyle. It took some time, but by 38, I was pregnant with my daughter, and I felt healthiest at that time. Felt healthier than I did 10 years ago. My gut was better. I just felt a lot more like I had more vitality. So yes, I'd love to talk about fertility. It's an area very close to my heart. I'm getting a lot of messages about what people would like to hear about: fertility, pregnancy, autoimmune, RA, rheumatoid arthritis. How much is the food allergy test? We have different packages. The package for 90 foods, which is honestly, I think that's enough for most people, unless you're dealing with a severe gut issue or eczema, is $500. Skincare without chemicals, I'd love to talk about that. I have a question. You don't eat bread anymore? I eat very, very little bread. It doesn't suit me. I have done this test. So interestingly, I've done this test. I do this test quite regularly, and I used to be gluten sensitive quite severely. I cut it out very strictly. I'm no longer gluten sensitive, but I just don't eat a lot of it. So I will eat it from time to time, but it's not part of my daily diet by any means. Lupus and autoimmune, yes, I'd love to talk about that. Okay, so somebody's saying that there was a diagnosis 1 month after the booster jab. So, there are people who are saying that they got COVID and suddenly they're not, other things have been triggered. I'm seeing a lot of eczema that's come from getting the infection. And that's understandable, because when you have an infection, your immune system does get alerted again. So that can happen. I've got somebody saying that they had a friend diagnosed with lupus about 5 years ago. I'm seeing a lot of lupus in young women. So yes, I do see that. I've got a great question about lactose-free milk and whether it helps with reducing food intolerances. So a food intolerance to dairy is typically measuring the casein, the protein in dairy, not necessarily the lactose. So if you have lactose-free milk, lactose is the sugar in milk, and many people are lactose intolerant, which means they just don't have the enzyme to digest it. If you have lactose-free milk, it doesn't mean that you've taken care of the dairy issue. You'd really need to go dairy-free for a period of time. You have lactose intolerance. I don't test that in the clinic because it's really easy to find out. If you can tolerate cheese and yogurt, but milk sends you to the toilet, that sounds like lactose intolerance. Casein intolerance is harder to diagnose on your own because it's a food sensitivity can take up to 72 hours to show up in symptoms. I've got somebody who says that they'd like to hear more about PCOS and endometriosis. This is great. I think I've got the schedule for the rest of the year over here. This is fantastic. I've got a question about what does the nutrition clinic do? So the question is your role to do food planning for different medical conditions? So I see people who have medical conditions. I see people who have, and so many people are sent to me through their doctor. I also see people who are divided into 3 categories, right? So there's the medical, there's a growing population of people who I consider biohackers. They're doing a lot of work on themselves. They have all these wearables and devices, and they just want somebody to come in and do the test that we do to help elevate the information that they have. But the largest population of people I work with are people who are not necessarily having a medical condition, but they're just not feeling great. They have low energy, they have brain fog, they have digestive issues, they have IBS, they're not able to sleep, they're just not feeling their best. And so that would be the largest population that I deal with. And what I do for them is to really optimize their food and lifestyle. When I first started my practice, I was dealing largely with food, and I was not doing tests. That's over a decade ago. Today, it's become a lot more test-based and specific, and it's included food and some lifestyle, because I think the world we are living in now, the amount of stressors on our body, we can't have a conversation about food alone without talking about stress and sleep as well. How do I support anxiety, depressive issues? And would medication affect our thyroid? A lot of people with thyroid issues also suffer from anxiety and low mood or depression. I do see a number of people who have I would actually say, this is top of my head, but I would say 30 to 40% of my clients come in on a sleeping pill or an antidepressant. Women, largely women, right? And we definitely work with anxiety, depression, mood disorders. And when it comes to mood, I'll tell you which parts of the body, if I can go back to so when it comes to mood, neurotransmitters are your brain chemicals, serotonin and dopamine, which impact your mood. They also impact PMS, impact melatonin production and sleep. They're affected by stress, affected by blood sugar and energy, affected by your hormones. And you must keep in mind that whatever is happening in the gut is affecting the brain. So there is this brain-gut connection. You cannot talk about mood without talking about gut. So when we talk about working with people who have anxiety, this is the kind of work I do. So I'll give you an example. I have this client who did a lot of training, kind of F45 twice a day, just overtraining in my opinion. And then took some supplements with caffeine in them. And that just, in this case, it was a young man, it just created these horrible palpitations. And then he had to get on a flight. And he ended up having a massive, massive panic attack, after which he was unable to exercise because more than 10 minutes of jogging would set him through palpitations. It was actually a level of trauma. Now, it happened on a single day, but the process, I think, started much before. He was working too much, not taking enough time off, training way too hard. And he reached a point where I was really grateful that he came in to see me very early on. He literally took the flight back and heard about me and came in to see me. And so he didn't go on antidepressants. And it took some time, but we were able to get him completely feeling good. He exercises, he travels, everything is kind of back to a new normal. But he would have been a typical candidate for medication, obviously, because he was suffering from major panic attacks. And had he come to see me with that, the way I function is that I never interfere in the medication you're taking, but I'm very happy to partner with your doctor to see how we can optimize that and see if it can be reduced. I've got a question about chemo. So again, I'd like to be clear about how I deal with people who have cancer. My role when working with a person who has cancer and getting treatment is purely supportive. I'm very, very hesitant to give supplements. And if I do give supplements, it has to be cleared by the doctor. Once a person has had cancer treatment, at that time, I'm very happy to come in and look at how we can really work on a prevention plan. Right. So when there is active medication, I am very, very cautious and I'm very respectful of what the doctor is doing to treat the acute condition. I've got a question about where you can find recordings of these sharing sessions. We have a YouTube channel. So if you just Google Nutrition Clinic, the Nutrition Clinic on YouTube, but we'll also be sending you all a link of the recordings. Thank you very much for all your lovely comments. I'm really happy to have all these questions. I've got a question about fatty liver disease. Fatty liver is, a lot of people think it's about just eating fat, but it's actually about eating sugar and an insulin issue. So if you don't burn the sugar you're consuming because you have poor blood sugar control or because you're over-consuming refined carbohydrates, those can be stored in the liver and that can become fatty liver. Now, there are other conditions, medical conditions that can lead to fatty liver, but from a diet and lifestyle point of view, the first thing we look at is blood sugar balance, how to support insulin production so that it's healthy, and how to get that stability, rather than just going off a big food group. Like, you do need healthy fats, so we can't just go completely off fats. So I've got a question about thyroxine. It depends. You mean the medication? Maybe I'll answer that one-on-one because I'm not sure about the question. Oh, thyroxine on a test. Maybe I could have a look at that. Jennifer, you and I can speak. You can show me that result, and I'd be happy to look at that. Right. Thank you very much. We are right on time, and thank you very much for joining. And I will see you back in 2 weeks. If there are a couple more questions, I'll be happy to take them. If not, we'll call it a night, and everybody can get some rest and start your day if you're in the US.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, somebody wants to hear about sleep disorders caused by perimenopause. I'd love to talk about sleep and perimenopause, 2 topics that I would love to share more about. Thank you very much. These are great comments and questions. I love hearing these questions. It makes me feel like I'm, engaging with a community and I'm giving you what you need. So thank you very much. I really appreciate that.